Code Vein 2 is a game that frustrated me, challenged me, and at times exhausted me, but by the end, it also rewarded me in a way I didn't expect. I've spent just about 40 hours with Code Vein 2, I completed the main story, cleared side content, pushed into the end game, and finished 2 of the 3 endings. And after seeing everything this game has to offer, I can say this confidently, Code Vein 2 is a flawed Soulslike, but one that ultimately earns its place. This review comes from someone who enjoys Soulslike, understands the genre, and wanted this game to fully succeed. Let's talk about what Code Vein 2 is, how it plays, where it struggles, and why it ultimately lands the way it does for me. Now, Code Vein 2 takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where humans and revenants, vampiric beings, exist on the brink of extinction. Roughly 100 years before the events of the game, a catastrophic phenomenon known as the Resurgence spiraled out of control. An attempt to seal it failed, giving rise to a greater threat called Luna Rapaces, which causes revenants to lose their sense of self and transform into mindless creatures known as horrors. You play as a revenant hunter, resurrected by Lou Magmel, who gives you her heart and grants you the ability to travel through time. Together, you move between the past, present, and key moments in history to hunt down the fallen heroes of the Resurgence, figures whose choices shape the timeline and determine how the world ultimately ends. On paper, this is a strong premise dealing with morality, sacrifice, and whether the world is even worth saving. Now, while the setup is interesting, the emotional execution is a bit uneven. The one relationship that consistently works is between Lou and the main character. That bond feels meaningful and earned. Outside of that, most characters feel like they serve the plot rather than drive emotional investment. There are multiple endings and major twists, but even after completing the second ending, my reaction wasn't shock or awe, it was quiet appreciation. I wasn't stunned, I wasn't deeply attached, I was curious, but not emotionally tethered, and that distinction definitely matters. Now, structurally, Code Vein 2 revolves around exploration, combat, and quests. The world map is intentionally obscured, requiring you to destroy map jammers to reveal new areas. Progression is spread across multiple eras, and if you're ever stuck, the game expects you to change timelines or return to a hub space called the Confluence. Now, fast travel is handled through missile save points, and traversal is expanded with a motorcycle, although not really the greatest way to traverse the lands, reflecting the game's larger scope compared to the original Code Vein. This structure explains why the game expects backtracking, though in practice, that expectation isn't always communicated clearly. But where combat and builds lay is where you find the core strength of this game. Combat is where Code Vein 2 just truly shines. The game feels responsive, weighty, and deliberate. Attacks land with impact, dodging is precise, and once the systems click, the depth becomes clear. Builds matter significantly, as you would probably expect in a Souls-like game. Throughout my playthrough, I constantly changed weapons, adjusted stats, experimented with different setups, and when things worked, victories felt earned. Some bosses feel unfair at first, even cheap, but there's always a workaround, and if you're willing to experiment with builds, learn patterns, and adapt, everything in this game can be overcome. For experienced Souls players, this is a solid challenge, but not an extreme one. Maybe not even to a newcomer if you are very, very dedicated to learning the systems and mechanics, which is where we come to the next major point, the systems and the difficulty of this game. Now, Code Vein 2 is deliberately systems heavy. Combat revolves around managing health, stamina, ichor, which is like ability resources, so think of like magic points, link points tied to your partner, and your build is shaped by weapons, blood codes, form A, drain weapons, boosters, and of course, your partner. They are going to play a massive role as you can actually have them side by side with you as a summon, which will make the game easier, but the alternative of not having them as a summon means that your abilities are much greater, but then again, you are also going one-on-one with these enemies or groups of enemies. Now, all of this feeds into the burden system, which determines mobility and stamina efficiency. The depth is real, but the onboarding is kind of rough. There's a lot of terminology, and a lot of mechanics, and the game doesn't always explain why something isn't working. But once I fully understood how everything interacted, the systems became rewarding. Getting there, however, was overwhelming. I mean, there's a lot of terminology. There are a lot of mechanics, and while they are good, it's just a lot to take in at once, especially when they throw it all at you in the beginning of the game. Now, while that is the strongest point of Code Vein 2, we got to talk about the weakest area, which is its world and level design. And this is definitely Code Vein 2's weakest pillar. Many interiors look extremely similar, and navigation is often unclear. I spent a lot of time lost, and not because I was just exploring randomly, but because I genuinely didn't know where to go. Objectives can be vague, and layouts rely heavily on twists, vertical layers, and reused assets. Even with guidance systems active, progression often felt more confusing than intentional. That sense of repetition doesn't stop with the level design either. The game frequently recycles major bosses you've already fought, simply increasing their health and abilities to reuse them later. It's a common JRPG tactic, but one that feels more like padding than meaningful escalation. There are strong visual touches. Rain soaking into clothing looks great, especially for the type of game that it is and the aesthetic that it goes for, but the world as a whole still feels static and uninspired. Now, the apocalypse theme explains the emptiness to a degree, but it doesn't fully excuse how repetitive large portions of the game feel. Sure, you've got multiple biomes that look different, but once you're in those biomes, they all begin to look very samey. Like, we're talking, didn't I see that tree over there? Didn't I see that house over there? Didn't I see that broken down car over there? I don't know, man. Didn't I see that broken bridge? Like, that's the kind of feeling that it gives you. And honestly, it just takes you out of the experience. It's quite immersion breaking and only serves to confuse you. But let's move on to the characters.
Go ahead and open your eyes.
There are a few good characters here. We've also got a lot of characters that didn't really move the needle for me personally. Some standouts were Holly, who is super grounded and human, a doctor, somebody who wants to help other people. We've got Jose, who is a super strong presence, very charismatic as well, and interesting to be around and fun to be around. Xenon Griffgoat, probably my favorite of them all. This guy is absolutely memorable and probably one of the coolest introductions in video games in quite a long time. And without spoiling it, I'd just say you definitely want to see this for yourself. But the others fade pretty quickly. I found Lyle to be probably the least interesting. There was one chapter in particular that dragged so heavily, it nearly made me just stop playing for that session and just walking away altogether. By the end, I wasn't thinking about most of these characters once I put the controller down. And that limits the narrative impact. That is the biggest issue with the narrative. But moving on to another very, very strong component of this game, and that's the audio and presentation. The soundtrack is consistently excellent. Boss fights and key moments are elevated by strong musical direction that often carries more emotional weight than the story itself. Character designs are stylish, the character creator is super robust, and performances are very solid. On PS5 Pro, performance is mostly stable, though there are occasional frame dips, especially when there are projectile-heavy encounters, and on the base PS5, I found the performance was not a consistent 60 on performance mode. You were definitely getting a lot of frame dips as well, although that could be addressed with a future patch. Another place where I had issues was the technical and UI issues, several reoccurring issues that added quite a bit of friction. I found the camera placement was not always great, especially if you did this one technique that would put a red bubble around you, or if you were using a two-handed sword or any heavy weapon, you found that your camera would pan behind your character's back and really block the enemy. So it was hard to anticipate an attack because you can't even see the enemy at times. So that was a battle that was consistent throughout the entire game, if you were especially using that ability and if you were using a heavy weapon. Now, the interact button also doubling as a skip dialogue button caused a lot of accidental skips. Like, you would walk up to a treasure chest, you're going to open it, but someone's talking, and then you accidentally skip the dialogue. Or you come up to a missile, someone's talking, you press the button, you skip the dialogue. And you're like, man, I don't want to skip the dialogue. I want to know what's happening in the story, and there was no way to go back. You pretty much miss out on it. Too bad, so sad. You didn't get to experience whatever was being said. One other issue that I had was healing inputs feeling inconsistent. I was also not crazy about the placement of the item consumption button, as you had to remove your thumb off the left analog stick. Can you imagine being in the middle of a battle and you got to move your hand off of your movement button to heal yourself? It really is counterintuitive in a way because, well, you're going to get hit if you definitely stop moving. And the other issue was that it wouldn't register every time, especially if you were pressing anything else. So you pretty much had to really focus on just hitting the consume item button. I, in fact, had to use my DualSense Edge controller and assign that button to the back paddle, which seemed to have solved my problem for the most part. None of these issues break the game, but they definitely accumulate and just make it a little less fluid and polished than they otherwise would be. But as I pushed deeper into the endgame and completed the game and obtained the second ending, something important happened. I was stuck on this boss for hours, not because I was underleveled. I was fully maxed out as far as equipment and gear go, and level, well, I was pretty well leveled at the time. But to overcome this challenge, I had to truly experiment, adapt my build, and master the moveset. There was no shortcut, but when I finally beat him, I had a sliver of health left. He was down to about 10%. Every dodge mattered. Every decision mattered, and suddenly everything just clicked. That victory was extremely satisfying. This is the kind of moment Souls-likes are built for, and it showed me what Code Vein 2 is capable of when all of its systems come together. Now, in fairness, this doesn't erase the game's flaws. The world design is still repetitive, navigation is still unclear, boss recycling still feels like padding, some sections test patience more than skill, but it recontextualizes the journey. Code Vein 2 is a game that frustrates you, challenges you, sometimes exhausts you, but if you stick with it and engage with its systems, it can reward you in a way that feels genuinely earned. Now, this game is absolutely an improvement over Code Vein 1. Combat is better, systems are deeper, production values are higher. The series still struggles with emotional hooks though, but mechanically, this is a big step forward. But this game is not necessarily for everyone. I would say Souls fans should play this. I would say RPG fans should play this if they have tolerance for a game that takes patience and discipline and mastering the mechanics. But for people who are looking for a story and just to experience a story without much challenge, this is probably not the one for you. This game offers no difficulty options and demands patience and dedication. You're not going to be able to get through this game without getting upset, without mastering the skills and really understanding the game, and most importantly, exploring the game and investing your time into mastering and understanding all the systems. Code Vein 2 is a flawed Souls-like with moments of real brilliance, and when it finally comes together, it delivers exactly the payoff the genre promises. I still have frustrations with it. I still think it could respect the player's time more consistently, but after experiencing the second ending and seeing the game at its best, it wouldn't feel right to call this anything less than a soft 8 out of 10. This is a game I respect, and by the end, one I genuinely appreciated.